Hey guys, what is going on? This is Pants Our Dragon, and today we'll be doing a little video on the top 8 top laners for lower ELO. Now, it's somewhat different from high ELO versus low ELO, but throughout this video you actually see a lot of similarities in terms of champions, but of course there are always going to be champions that are better in lower ELO than in high ELO. And when I say the term low ELO, I refer to people in like bronze, silver, gold, even platinum a little bit. And since I already did a video like this for the jungle and it did really well, I thought, hey, why don't we do a top lane video since apparently you guys liked it a lot. So that's what this video is going to be about, and with all that being said, let's get started. Alright, so let's go over the criteria that we're going to be using for this list. So first off, the champion must be easy to play. Whether that means mechanically or strategically, it must be relatively simple. There's going to be one case where a champion is just plain OP, but we'll get on to that later in the video. The next thing we have to take in consideration is that the champion scales great into the mid game and late game. Since games in lower ELO usually take a while to finish, as it's usually a bloodbath and there's a lot of team fights going on. So it's better for lower ELO to play for that mid game and late game. The next consideration I took for the criteria is that the top laner kinda has to be tanky, since tanks are really good in Season 6 with all the changes to the items. The next criteria are champions that don't fall off when they're behind. So a champion that has a lot of utility, innate tankiness, is still useful with only just levels are really good champions for lower ELO. Since you know, some people might lose their lane, but when mid game comes around they'll still be useful because they have utility or they're just naturally tanky. And the next one is synergy with the resolve tree. That mastery tree is probably the strongest tree in Season 6 right now. So champions that have great synergy with it are going to be great champions. Although you'll see 2 champions in this list who have a rare case. And the next thing is the champion must have good base damage. If a champion does not have good base damage, then he's not going to be very useful when he is behind. Now there are 2 things I avoided when I made this list, and one of those things is champions that are useless when they're behind. So a champion like Jax is very useless when he doesn't have his Gunzu's Rage Blade or some other items. A champion that doesn't have any utility or being naturally tanky is also kinda useless too. And the second thing I didn't take in consideration were high mechanical champions like Fiora. So you know, low ELO players, they make a lot of mistakes. What better way to minimize those mistakes than playing an easier champion? The less mistakes you make, the more closer you will be to a high ELO player in terms of performance. You know, there's not much difference between a high ELO Warwick versus a low ELO Warwick, except for the strategy. Mechanically, they're relatively the same. And like I said earlier, some of these champions are already in high ELO, so don't be surprised to see some champions you're already familiar with. Now, are we ready for the list? I think it's about time. So first off, we have Garen, one of my favorite champions to play in the top lane just because he's so stupid and luckily a really good champion in lower ELO. So mechanically, he's really easy to play. Q, E, R, kill people. Press W when you're taking a lot of damage. Sounds pretty simple to me. No skill shots? Check mark. Tanky? I think so. Synergy with the resolve tree? Of course. And has good base damage? Of course he does. So he actually fits the criteria really well that I put out there. Also, he's really good at destroying squishies. I mean, no one peels in lower ELO, let's be honest here. So jump on the enemy's backline, spin around, use your R, they're dead. Congratulations, you just carried that team fight. And honestly, he's just a thick brick mid game and late game. So yeah, I definitely recommend him for lower ELO. Now here's the recommended build for Garen. Pretty simple stuff. It's a little more carry oriented. As you can see, we're getting Black Cleaver and Status Gauge, but he's actually very diverse in item builds, so you can build anything tanky-ish. And for the rune page, it is just physical damage with some basic runes. And for the skill order, it goes something like this. Alright, so that's enough talking about Garen and clips of Garen. I'm pretty sure you're probably sick of it already, but why don't we transition to someone named Kale? Alright, so Kale is easy to play. Not as easy as Garen, but relatively easy to play. Since you just press E, press your Q on the target you want to kill, and then you just swing that sword. Then you just press R on whoever is about to die. So she's somewhat easy to play. But the next thing I have to emphasize a lot is that she scales super hard into the mid game and late game. She's one of those champions who is a hyper carry, as she unloads a lot of damage onto the enemy team, and even if she is behind, she still has utility with her R and her W. Although she is not a tanky top laner or has synergy with the resolve tree, she is just a champion that scales super well into the mid game and late game. This champion is also being seen in higher ELO just a little bit, so I wouldn't be too surprised to see her somewhere in the future of the LCS. Now let's get on to the build. So for Masteries, it is 18-12-0, emphasizing that on hit with the Fervor. Rune page is just attack speed, some armor, and cooldown reduction per level for blues. Now for the build, it is a bit tricky since she is a very diverse champion, but it looks something like this. Rune Arms is kind of weird since, it gives crit, but at least we have some AD from the Rage Blade. For the skill order, we are emphasizing an on-hit build, so we go E first, and then Q, and then W. Alright, so that is enough for Kale. The next champion you will be seeing is Pantheon. So Pantheon is a special case. Like I mentioned earlier, he did get buffed in Season 6 because of the changes, and basically what happened to him is Ghost Blade is now a better item since it doesn't give crit and it gives more AD. There's also a lot more armor penetration items now, and he's also really good against certain champions like Gangplank and Fiora, since his passive blocks their auto attacks, and the mastery changes help him a decent amount. Now, in relative to the criteria we listed, he is fairly easy to play. I mean, there is no skill shot involved with him. Point and click stun, that's nice. The only thing that takes some strategy is the usage of his ultimate, as positioning of it is somewhat crucial. But other than that, he's a fairly straightforward champion. He's also an extremely dominant laner because of his Q, and the way he scales into the mid game and late game, he kind of falls off late game, but his mid game is very, very strong. And his base damage is also strong too. But yeah, with all the changes to Season 6, he just got indirectly buffed. Now let's move on to the build. So for the Masteries, it is 12-18-0. For runes, it's something similar to Garen. And for item build, it's an AD build with a little tankiness in the end. And for the skill order, we want to max out Q, and then our E, and then our W. Yes, he is a fairly strong champion at the moment, and I highly recommend him if you want to carry from the top lane. Alrighty, so that's enough about Pantheon. Let's move on to Ramus. Yes, Ramus top lane. I am not kidding you, it is a Ramus in the top lane. Okay, so this didn't actually make too much sense to me until I tried it out. But basically, in the laning phase, he can definitely be abused since he's pure melee, and he doesn't really have too much harass, but it's also really hard to kill him if you're trying to gank him, because of that W. But when he gets into that mid game and late game stage, he's just so strong. He does a lot of damage with the Thornmail and like his abilities, and he's also really, really tanky. So when he comes to the mid game, he destroys team fights, and he's also very hard to deal with, and it doesn't matter if he's super far behind, his base stats are what makes him really good. You could have like a Sunfire at 25 minutes, and you'd still be super useful. In conjunction with the criteria I have, he's very easy to play, that's true. Roll into people, taunt, W, R, kill people, easy, kinda like Garen. Skills great into mid game and late game, is a tanky top laner, doesn't become useless when he's behind, has synergy with the resolve tree, and has good base damage. And especially in a meta where there's like AD Corki mid, Graves, Kindred jungle, and then an AD carry, and then there's just like a lot of AD champions in the game right now. And since this champion excels at building armor, he is a great counter to all of that. So yeah, it does sound pretty stupid on paper, Ramus top lane. Kinda sounds lackluster in the laning phase, but you actually become very useful in the mid game and late game. Now, finally, let's get on to the build. So for runes and masteries, I go 12-0-18. Then for the rune page, it's kind of weird, but probably wondering about the hybrid pen. He does have a bit of both damage, but he does more magic damage in the late game, so I feel like this is the best way to go for him. You could go attack speed on him, but I don't think your goal is to win the laning phase with him. And then for the item build, you want to get that Thornmail as soon as possible, but not right before Sunfire. You could also get Abyssal Scepter somewhere in this build, but it's a bit risky since you want some hit point after you have so much resist. Although I will admit that going Abyssal Scepter is pretty fun since you do loads of damage. Skill order is just max out W, then E, then your Q. Alrighty, so we're halfway done this video, and next up is going to be Malphite. So similar characteristics to Ramus, building armor. In a meta where AD champions are really good, he excels at stomping on that. So he is pretty easy to play. I mean, you just press R on a bunch of people and your job is done. Is a tanky top laner that does scale well into mid game and late game, and yeah, also has great base damage. Now, in terms of the build, it's almost very similar to Ramus. The only difference is, a little bit of the masteries and the item build, as we're kind of prioritizing more on CDR and maybe a little bit more damage. Abyssal Scepter can be replaced by a Spirit Visage or Banshee's Veil. It is up to you, but generally you want to be building tanky with him. For skill order, I max out E and then W and then Q. Now for the next champion, a champion who is also used in high ELO, Nautilus. So a great champion to play as he does fit most of the criteria, and he is pretty easy to play, maybe a little bit harder than some other tanks in this video since he kinda has a skill shot with Q I guess, but it's a pretty big skill shot so it's hard to miss. The other thing that may be hard is his ability combo, but once you get the hang of it, he's fairly easy to use, and he probably offers the most CC out of anyone in this list, so he's definitely really strong in that mid game and late game. Alright, so why don't we get on to the build. So for masteries, it is 12-0-18. And for the rune page, it's kind of like Ramus, although with Ramus you could go attack speed, same with Malphite too. On Nautilus, I do not recommend it since his base attack speed is very low. And for item build, it is a general tank build. Now for a skill order, I max out E, then my W, and then my Q. Alright, so next up we're going to be doing another special case just like Pantheon, and that is going to be Quinn, one of my favorite champions for the top lane. So overall, this champion is just super strong in Season 6. When they change a bunch of stuff and now she has that like gray smoke screen on her Q, you know, every like 8 seconds, it's pretty annoying. But on top of that, there's also the insane mobility she gets from her R and her damage output. She's also one of the best top laners in a 1v1 situation, as anytime a melee champ wants to engage on her, she just uses her E and their gap closer is nullified. Unless the enemy jungler ganks her a lot and comes in a 1v2 situation, she wins most matchups. Basically, ever since they added that blind to her Q, she just showed up and started being really obnoxious. Now, in terms of easy to play, she's actually not that easy to play, since her kit relies heavily on her hitting her Q, and using her ultimate strategically can be a little difficult. Knowing when to use her E is somewhat difficult also, as you can outplay a lot of enemy champions with it. But yeah, personally I'd say she's a difficult champion to learn, but in terms of criteria, she does scale pretty well into mid game and late game. I mean, she is an AD carry, who actually does quite a bit of damage. And she's not really too useless when she's behind, since she has her blind from her Q, and she still has a mobility coming from her R, so she can split push or like help gank for her team and find some picks. And if you're looking for a champion who can carry from the top lane, I'd highly recommend playing Quinn. Alrighty, so now it's time for the build. For Masteries, I go 18-12. If you think about going Thunderlords, I don't recommend it at all, because you can actually get a lot of stacks and fervor very fast as Quinn. For the runes, I go a basic marksman page and put a little critical chance in there because it's kinda funny. And finally, the build looks something like this. Her item build is definitely diverse, so the build order could change, but I'd do something like this if I were ahead. Then skill order is max out Q, then your E, then your W. Alrighty, so next up is going to be the last champion of this video, and that's going to be Volibear, who is also a god tier jungler for lower ELO. So this champion in the laning phase, it's kind of similar to Ramus in terms of no harass. You know, it's like I can only trade when you're directly in front of me, but in terms of the champion, he does fit the criteria very well, as he is, well, pretty easy to play. And the reason he isn't played too much in higher ELO is because he's really easy to kite, but in lower ELO, where you can just run and do whatever fuck you want as a tank, he does a lot of damage. So yeah, this champion scales really good into mid game and late game, has lots of nice base damage, synergy with the resolve tree, and yeah, he's pretty tanky with that passive. Now on to the build. So 12-0-18 for the Masteries. Rune page is going to be a little bit odd and emphasizes a lot on hit point, and for the build, it's going to look something like this. Deadman's Plate is a must on him, so people can't run away. And for skill order, you want to max out W and then E and then Q. Alrighty, so we're finally done this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this list. There's definitely been a lot of champions I had to discuss, but yes, those would be my 8 god tier low elo champions for the top lane. And if I were in lower elo, those are champions that I would play. Now, in one of my other videos, I asked, what is your pro tip for clearing the jungle? And here are some of my favorite comments. For this video, I want you guys to comment below on what is your go-to top laner. Mine is Quinn because I'm a dirty Quinn player. I mean, hey, what can I say? I'm an OP abuser. But yeah, make sure to leave a comment below on your go-to top laner. And if you did like this video, make sure to leave a like. And if you want to see more feature videos like this, make sure to subscribe. Anyways, I am Panzer Dragon, and I'll see you guys next time.